Welcome back to another episode of The Final Hour. Today we're looking at one of the most secure galleries in America. 10 layers of security, motion sensors, magnetic locks, glass cabinets, surveillance cameras, infrared beams, and laser grids. A team of former spies guard priceless works of art day and night. You would think it was impossible to sneak in, impossible to get past the guards, impossible to pick the locks, impossible to disable the alarms, impossible to escape unnoticed. But what if I told you that on April 3rd, 2009, 8 paintings vanished from the heart of Manhattan, and 1 guard was found dead? Well, it happened. And here are the details. At 6:03 a.m., a janitor unlocked the front door of the Rosenthal Private Collection and entered the gallery as he normally did every morning. He expected silence. What he found instead was the body of Daniel Cole, the night guard. He was lying face down on the marble floor in the center of the gallery, hands outstretched, motionless. No signs of a struggle, no blood. No forced entry, no broken glass, no tripped alarms. And when police arrived within minutes, they discovered that every motion sensor in the building had been deactivated. Every surveillance camera wiped clean. All but one. A single grainy image remained. It showed a man wearing white gloves reaching into the frame of a painting, standing in the gallery, looking directly into the camera, smiling. Daniel Cole was still breathing, but when paramedics arrived, he was rushed to the hospital, where he died shortly after. His cause of death: asphyxiation. But there was no bag over his head, no rope around his neck, no fingerprints or signs of a struggle. There were no witnesses. No one had heard anything. The entire building slept just feet away from the dead man. It seemed like a scene from a movie. Impossible, impassable, unreal. But there was one detail that confirmed this was all too real. The guard wasn't just dead, he was missing. Daniel hadn't shown up for work the evening before, which was strange because he was never late. And when his wife couldn't reach him by phone, she drove to the gallery on West 57th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. It was in the basement of this building, concealed behind a sushi restaurant, that Daniel was supposed to be guarding the private collection. But when she arrived, she found the front door locked. She rang the bell and waited. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. So she walked around the block, let herself into the apartment above the gallery, and climbed down the fire escape. There was a window open on the ground floor. She crawled through and found Daniel dead. The FBI descended on the gallery. Officers combed through the empty rooms. Forensics scoured for clues. Investigators questioned everyone who had any connection to the gallery, from employees to owners to collectors to neighbors. The search turned up nothing. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no tripped alarms. Every motion sensor had been disabled. Every camera wiped clean except one. Single blurry image remained. A man in white gloves standing in the gallery, smiling directly into the lens. That was the only piece of evidence connecting a human being to the crime. And whoever he was, he had time on his side. He knew the layout of the building. He knew where the surveillance equipment was located. He knew how to bypass the alarm system. He killed the guard, stole 8 paintings, then waited hours before leaving the building and switching off the power. He spent a considerable amount of time inside the gallery, which raised 2 questions. Who was he? And why did he kill Daniel Cole? Police searched for answers. They checked missing persons reports. They scoured databases. They interviewed art collectors. Nothing turned up. It wasn't until weeks later that an art expert recognized the paintings that had been stolen. 4 Picassos, 2 Cezannes, 1 Monet, and 1 Matisse, worth a combined total of $100 million. And while the FBI focused on the paintings, the medical examiner released Daniel Cole's autopsy report. He had died of compression asphyxia. In other words, someone had sat on his face long enough to cut off his supply of oxygen, but without leaving any marks. It was a technique that favored a killer with martial arts training. But Daniel had resisted, scratching the man several times. Unfortunately, the scratches were deep enough to get a DNA sample, and forensics could not link the attack to any known assailant. As far as the paintings, 4 of them were insured, which meant the FBI could put a price tag on the theft, $100 million. And that automatically put the investigation under the purview of the FBI's art crime team, a unit dedicated to combating the trafficking of stolen artifacts. But despite the millions at stake, the art heist didn't attract much media attention. That's because the gallery was private. That is to say, The public didn't know about it. As far as they were concerned, the paintings never existed. So the FBI kept a low profile and pursued every lead they had, none of which panned out. A breakthrough came in 1998 when police in Amsterdam discovered a similar theft at a private gallery. One guard was found dead. Several paintings were stolen. Surveillance tapes were destroyed. The only difference was that no one had been caught. But now the FBI had a lead. They had another angle of comparison. And in 2001, the same thing happened in Zurich. Again, one guard was found dead. Paintings were stolen. Tapes were wiped clean. This time the list of stolen works included one painting that had been taken from the Rosenthal collection. Henri Matisse's The Woman in the Red Hat. In other words, the same man was responsible for 3 separate deaths. But he had struck twice before. In 2004, he did it again, this time in Lisbon. And each time he left a calling card, a note etched into the plaster behind one of the frames. Art belongs to no one alone. Police suspected an inside job, but no one came forward. No ransom note, no black market sale. The paintings had simply vanished. The only similarities were the private collections, the silent breaches, the one dead guard. But unlike those cases, this time a message had been left behind. 6 words etched into the plaster behind one of the frames. Art belongs to no one alone. For 12 years, nothing happened. The case went cold. Families moved on. Daniel Cole's widow never got answers. The FBI closed the file. Then in 2021, police in Spain were searching a home near Barcelona in connection with a missing persons case. Inside, they found one of the stolen Rosenthal paintings framed, clean, hanging above a fireplace. The home belonged to Luis Argello, an art dealer who'd vanished in 1994. No signs of him, no living relatives, only a fingerprint that matched the man who smiled into the security camera in 2009. So how did a dead man steal a painting 15 years after he disappeared? Well, he didn't. Or rather, he didn't do it alone. The truth was that Luis Argello had accomplices, people who helped him frame the painting, hang it on the wall, and live out the rest of his days safe in the knowledge that he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. Or maybe he never hung the painting. Maybe he never even returned to Barcelona. Maybe he lived out his remaining days on a beach somewhere in Thailand or the south of France, sipping wine and waiting for the day he could return to New York and complete the heist. But there was one small problem. His fingerprint was found at the property of his deceased mother in Barcelona. She was dead. There was no way to prove that he had ever been there. In other words, the man in the picture was almost certainly Luis Argello, but there was no way to prove it. And that was the last clue in the case. The only new piece of information that the FBI had in 12 years, and all it gave them was more questions than answers. Like, who was Argello? Why did he steal the paintings? Where are the rest of them? And most importantly, where is he? To this day, the FBI believes that the paintings are still in Europe, divided among multiple thieves. They don't know what happened to Louis Argello, they don't know if he's alive or dead, and they don't know why he chose the Rosenthal collection. Maybe it was the perfect target. Maybe it was personal. But whatever the reason, the case remains unsolved. The families have received no answers. The FBI have no suspects, and the only clue left behind by the thief, a single sentence etched into a wall. Art belongs to no one alone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up.